both inside companies. I've worked at Verso Corporation and at International Paper, and then also as a consultant to customers of the paper industry.
Thank you. Mark?
Thank you. I'm Mark Pitts. I'm with AF&PA, and first of all, this is my first business travel since COVID, so thank you for having me. I feel honored to have this be my first business trip, and I've been to a lot of BMI meetings over the years. I've been in the industry for over 30 years, was in the industry for 25 with one of the companies that's here today, Gladfelter. Seen a lot of change, and one thing that hasn't changed is that Jim Wazotsky is still on the front row. So,
I'm not going to pretend to understand what that joke meant, but maybe after I've been here for a while I will.
But just to touch with AF&PA, if you don't know us, we are the organization that represents the industry of paper manufacturers before the administration and legislators, policymakers, and regulators. And before I came with AF&PA, I didn't really know the difference between those. But we support the interests of the industry, and hopefully we'll all learn a little more about sustainability today.
Thank you. And then Sherri, can you give us a quick intro?
Thank you very much. I wish I were with you today. It looks like there are quite a few of you, and I haven't had my first business trip since the beginning of the pandemic yet, but this is my first BMI conference. So thrilled to be with you today. I am the Chief of UN Publications at the United Nations. I work at the UN headquarters in New York. It's in the Department of Global Communications because we see publishing as a communications activity and a way of sharing reliable primary source information with the rest of the world at the moment, in particular on the Sustainable Development Goals, and of course in the context of COP26 this week, very much on climate change. So thrilled to be here with you today, at least and looking forward to my first hybrid event. Quite impressive to see my face on those big screens. Thank you.
Wonderful to have you. We're grateful that you could join us. So I'm first going to define what is sustainability, right? Because this is a word that we all hear, we all say, and I'm going to give a really simple definition of what does sustainability mean. And sustainability simply means meeting our needs without jeopardizing the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And sustainability is really broken down into 3 key categories, and those are environmental, social, and governance. So if you hear the words ESG, or the letters ESG, I should say, that's what they stand for. The first topic we're going to discuss is what does sustainability mean to each of you and your organizations, and what steps are your organizations taking to bring sustainability to the forefront. And each speaker has a couple of slides that will highlight their sustainability efforts. And we will begin with Sherri. And Sherri, please feel free to let me know when to advance the slides, because I know you don't have this controller here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So as you can see on the screen, those are the Sustainable Development Goals. So there are 17 of them, which is quite a lot. And so it's a massive program that UN member states voted in favor of in 2015. And so this is really our agenda for the next, well, I guess it's 9 years now. We only have 9 years left in order to achieve them. And I think that book manufacturing in particular can contribute to achieving them. It's, as I say, an ambitious agenda. This week is COP26. And I think that we're all very much aware that we have to do more. We have to act faster, and we have to be more ambitious. We know that we have to maintain global warming at 1.5 degrees and reach global net zero emissions by 2050. What that really means is we need a 5-fold increase in ambition in order to achieve it. So we're not doing enough. The industry that we work in, the publishing industry and the book manufacturing industry, really can have a significant impact on altering the course of climate change. The publishing industry really is uniquely place to not only communicate about climate change and the SDGs by publishing research and fact and science, but also by adopting sustainable business practices, which is really, I think, what we're going to focus on today throughout the supply chain. So I think that you can change the slide now. So again, the supply chain, we can adopt sustainable business practices throughout the supply chain. And we are going to focus, I think, more today on the production part of that chain. And that really is where the bulk of the carbon footprint of the publishing industry is. Having said that, even from the editorial phase, we can start by planning an environmentally friendly book. We can do the specifications, the packaging, the quantity, and considering digital formats as well. We can also look at things like using sustainable energy sources in the office. It's not just within the actual production of the book, but also how we live in our offices and in our daily lives. And then again, if we look at the production part of things, we know that paper represents about 50 to 80% of publishers' carbon footprint, and it's the largest contributor to the publishing industry's carbon footprint. And I learned recently from the Printers Agency in Europe that 75% of a printer's carbon footprint comes from paper as well. So we need to look at things that I'm sure you've all given a lot of thought to, like having locally sourced paper, certified paper, looking at the inks and the other materials we use, and then using digital proofs when possible. I just want to spend just a couple of seconds on that, if I may. Many people think that digital is the solution to all of these issues regarding carbon footprints, and it's not. It is part of the solution, but it's not a perfect solution to everything. Data centers are very carbon heavy. According to some estimates, by 2030, electricity usage from ICT could contribute up to 23% of greenhouse gas emissions. That's huge. It's actually more than the automotive and aviation industry combined today. So the key to this really is to use technology wisely and find a balance. I also think that it's very important to remember that we need to provide print options in developing countries or in areas where people don't have easy access to broadband internet or the tools or devices that we need in order to read online. And I think that we all can agree that nothing really replaces the feel and the smell of a printed book. So digital part of the solution, but not all of the solution. Suppliers, so in the supply chain, it's a lot about holding paper suppliers accountable for sustainable practices and other members of the supply chain, and using local suppliers wherever possible. It's also a lot about waste management, managing quantities, print on demand, for example, looking at how much we pulp, who pulps it, are they actually recycling what we send to them, et cetera, et cetera. And all the way through to sales and marketing, where we often don't think about the packaging and the displays. Are they reusable? Are they made of recyclable materials, plastic bags, and then printed promotional materials like catalogs and flyers? So those are just some of the things that we can look at. We can go into more detail on that during the interactive part. And then just the last slide. So the program that we have created at the UN with the International Publishers Association, in fact, is the Sdg Publishers Compact. It's a good place to start. We have many printers and book manufacturers and technology companies who are members as well. We have over 150 members. We launched it 1 year ago, so it's quite good to have already 150 members, and some of them are associations that represent hundreds of members. And it's really about making a commitment. It's about providing a framework to publishing and book manufacturing entities that would like to become involved. So it's really about prioritizing sustainability, raising awareness through the actual publishing and internal communications and communications across the supply chain, and then taking action, which, as I said at the beginning, is really crucial right now. We do not have time to think about it anymore or plan for it. We have to actually take concrete steps towards reversing climate change. So anybody can sign on to this, and I would encourage you all to do so. It's free, and it's a way to really prioritize sustainability, not only your business practices, but also your daily lives. So
wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, and next, Mark, what does sustainability mean to you and your organization, and what steps is your organization taking to bring sustainability to the forefront? And we'll do about 5 minutes each.
Okay. Maybe you could hold the slide for just a second.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'll be speaking really about the paper industry, and the concepts behind sustainability in our industry are not new. We've been putting those principles of sustainability into practice for years, long before sustainability became a thing. And I think for decades, the most obvious example of sustainability among paper companies came in the form of forest stewardship, and that goes back to the days when paper companies also owned timberlands. And we practiced the most basic concept of sustainability, and it's the same thing that Emily mentioned, which was essentially, meeting the current need for fiber without compromising the needs for future generations. And for the paper and forest industry for years, that was, planting 2 to 4 trees for every one that you harvested. So that was kind of the basis in our industry for sustainability for a long time. And again, as Emily mentioned, sustainability principles sort of evolved over time, and they became the 3 pillars of sustainability, and that's what we kind of know today. But sustainability was also embedded in operations, where we use all of a tree in our operations. We reuse our chemicals. We reuse the water about 10 times. We treat it before it comes in, and it comes out cleaner than it came in many cases. So those principles were sort of embedded in our DNA, we said, for a lot of years. And more than a decade ago, and I think these are a little out of sequence, so can you try the next slide, please, Emily?
You got it.
And how about maybe back up 2 more? There should be one before this one. There we go. About a decade ago, we put together a program called Better Practices, Better Planet 2020, and that was where we were the first industry to set industry-wide sustainability goals, and membership in AF&PA was predicated upon every member agreeing to contribute to those goals. And that was in 2020 was our target. We've met nearly all of those goals, and we've just set a new set, which as you see on the slide here, for 2030. And this was a multi-stakeholder approach where we have focused on new goals in 2030 around greenhouse gas emissions, advancing the circular value chain, striving for 0 workplace injuries, driving water stewardship, and advancing more resilient U.S. forests. So I think my time may be short on this because I probably spent more time than
let's give you a couple more minutes.
Okay.
Do you want to
So
talk?
just a couple of examples of other things that we're doing along the line of examples of how we are promoting sustainability. This slide shows an example of where we are recognizing our members' commitment to innovation and performance in sustainability. And we just a week or so ago announced our 2021 Sustainability Award winners. You can see them here on the slide for different categories. It may be innovation, it may be leadership, it could be energy efficiency, it could be recycling, it could be water recovery, it could be many different categories. So that is one way that we advance sustainability and promote that in our industry. And then if we go back one, I'll just mention, forward one, there we go. For a lot of years, and people have probably heard this a lot, leadership in our industry often said, we have a great sustainable story to tell, but we need to tell it better. And that was really one of the imperatives around creating a commodity checkoff program. You've heard of the Got Milk campaign or the egg campaign. Well, we did one on paper and packaging through the Paper and Packaging Board. And you can see here, this is their latest campaign. It's all about sustainability and how sustainability unfolds. It's a business to consumer focus. Even though our business typically is business to business, this is a business to consumer focus. So we're expanding that sphere and trying to change the perceptions of the consumer base, because consumers often think of our industry as maybe an analog industry in a digital world. So this is a way that we can help tell our story and sort of overcome some of the legacy thinking or perceptions that consumers may have that may not really reflect the actual work that we're doing on sustainability.
Great. Thank you. Okay, Kathi.
Thanks. Well, for those of you who may not be familiar with Two Sides, we are a global industry-funded membership, nonprofit membership organization, and our members come from across the entire print, paper, and paper-based packaging supply chain. So everyone from paper producers and converters to publishers and printers, equipment manufacturers, and great allied organizations like BMI. And our mission is very focused. We promote the sustainability of print, paper, and paper-based packaging, and we challenge, and it's something that no one else really does, we challenge and dispel common unsubstantiated, sorry, that's a mouthful, and misleading environmental myths about paper. And we do that really in two key ways. The first is we actually are out telling the sustainability of story of paper. And we do that we have a little bit of different approach than a lot of other organizations, is that we use science, we use science, fact-based materials to tell the story through a variety of different media. And then we also provide a wealth of materials for our members to do the same thing. And something else that we do that no one else in the industry is really doing, and actually companies really either don't want to do or can't do, is that we actually challenge corporations and the media and other organizations who are making unsubstantiated and misleading claims about paper. So why is that? Why should that be important to you? Well, if you think about it for a minute, think if there's a large corporation who is urging their customers to go electronic on their bills and statements, and in doing so, they're telling their customers that electronic communication is more environmentally friendly and paper is bad for the environment. Or say a widely read publication is publishing an article about paper and talking about how bad it is for the environment. Well, what that does is has a huge influence. It could be anywhere from thousands to millions of people who see those messages, and that influences their perceptions and makes them think broadly that paper is really bad for the environment. So whether you're talking about books or corrugated boxes or printing papers, that kind of transfers across the entire industry. So I'll give you a couple of quick examples. This year, Popular Science magazine published an article, and the title of the article is Paper is Wildly Unsustainable. And it was written by a couple of pop culture writers who clearly knew nothing about the paper industry. And so we contacted Popular Science, and we're intentionally not combative with the organizations that we talk with. We just present the case for paper. So we contacted Popular Science and said, if you're going to publish an article about a product in an industry that a lot of people depend on, that is beneficial to a lot of people and supports a lot of jobs, you might want to talk to people in the industry, to forestry professionals, to people in the university community, to find out a little bit about the science of paper making, particularly for a publication that has science in the title. So they actually did that, and they engaged a credible journalist who wrote a story that was much more balanced and really presented a more honest and fair presentation of the paper industry. Now, they talked to NGOs as well, which is fine, and some of the things that were included in the article from the NGOs we didn't necessarily agree with, But what that does is it gives the industry and paper products in general, puts us on a level playing field so people can either go out and look for more information on their own, or they can use that information to make a judgment about the environmental benefits and impacts of paper products. Second quick example, Medicare. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm fast approaching. Medicare every year puts out a fairly sizable paper booklet that explains benefits for the upcoming year. And in the spring, they started promoting that booklet, encouraging people to go online to download it instead of getting it in the mail because it's better for the environment. So we wrote a letter to the head of Medicare, and remarkably, I didn't think anything in the federal government happened this quickly, but we got a letter back in 2 weeks that said, you know, we have no intent of misleading anybody, and we certainly don't want to do anything that threatens American jobs by saying something that's unsubstantiated about the paper industry. So they pledged that they would stop using environmental messages, negative environmental messages about paper. So, and Medicare, I would also say Medicare, there are 44 million Medicare recipients in the United States. So that's now 44 million people who are not going to see those negative environmental messages about paper. And just one more quick point. I mean, digital, the world is increasingly going digital. I mean, this meeting is the perfect example of that. And I think we can say, though, that paper and digital are both remain very important and are very relevant to society and meet a lot of people's needs. So, and it doesn't really have to be an either-or scenario. So what Two Sides is doing is we are trying to make sure that business decision makers like you all and your customers and average consumers have the fact-based information that they need to make informed decisions about using paper products.
Great, wonderful. Thank you. So just a few quick words about Roland. So at Roland, sustainability is the core value of everything we do, and we bring paper products full circle with sustainability innovation, sustainable innovation. Our mill is fueled by biogas. We have a closed loop water system, and we're transforming post-consumer content into premium, recycled, chlorine-free papers. And we're proud to have the smallest environmental footprint of this product type in North America. How are we doing this? So biogas is one of our key sustainability features, and it really came about because an employee in 2004 took an interest in alternative fuel sources. And so what is biogas? Well, nearby landfill emits gas. It's captured from the atmosphere, cleaned, thankfully, compressed, and then transported in an 8-mile pipeline to our mill. So it's fueling 93% of the operation's fuel needs. And in doing this, we're saving 70,000 tons of CO2 annually, which is equivalent to keeping 23,400 compact cars off the road each year. Another tool that we are very excited about using are life cycle assessments. Our life cycle assessments are third-party generated and conform to ISO 14040 through ISO 14044 standards. A life cycle assessment measures the entire environmental impact of any product from raw material extraction through processing and manufacturing through distribution and disposal. Just a couple of key highlights from our Roland Enviro LCA, which is our 100% recycled paper, is that we have a 62% lower impact on climate change. We also, since we're harvesting from what I call the urban forest, from landfill, we're reusing recycled products, we have virtually no impact on biodiversity and the species that we all share in our communities. Okay, so that's it for the slide portion of our presentation. We're now going to move on and talk about a couple more questions, and then we'll open it up to your questions. I want to start with Sherri, and I want to speak specifically about why sustainability is important to specifically the book industry.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you everybody for those great examples. It's inspiring to hear some of the things that you're doing and communicating about it as well. So I think that the book industry is really uniquely placed, as I mentioned earlier, to not only communicate about the goals and educate people all ages, going from children all the way up to adults like us, through research and publishing of novels or illustrated books or any form of book, but also again acting on the sustainable development goals and in favor of sustainability through adopting sustainable business practices, many of which you've given some great examples of. So I think that that's what is quite unique about the book industry. We know that there is an area where we can try and do better in the supply chain. That is the part that is the most impactful. The paper footprint is what is most impactful in terms of the carbon footprint of book manufacturing. There is a lot that has been done. There's more that can be done. I'm very happy to hear that there are some industry standards, some objectives, some things that we can, work towards. And I think that it's key to have some indicators and to work together as an industry, because that will make real impact. We have impact in our daily lives. Every industry has impacts, and there are industries that are more impactful than the book industry, of course. But if we act together in the book industry, I think that we really can make real change. So I think those are really the reasons why the book industry is key to achieving the sustainable development goals and positively impacting climate change.
Thank you. So I've recently returned from a conference in San Diego called Sustainable Brands, and I was presenting consumer research, and myself, along with all of the other presenters of the ESG, the social component of sustainability seemed to be the most important right now. What seems to be happening in sustainability is that environment is now a standard, right? We all know about it. We all know about the climate crisis, and hopefully we all know about the SDGs and are working towards that. And most of us have, wonderful sustainability plans in place. The social part, how are we treating our workers across the supply chain? What positive impacts are we having on our communities that we're operating in? That's the kind of the next piece that I think we're going to need to start focusing on. So can you speak a little bit about that, the social piece and across the supply chain as you see it?
Sure. I think that again, on an individual level and on an industry level, that is obviously key. The SDGs are all about reducing inequality. And there are many things that we can do as organizations to encourage staff to make responsible choices in their daily lives, and for our corporations, our companies to make responsible choices. There's a huge movement as well. It's a social issue, obviously, as well as diversity and inclusion. So gender equality and just overall diversity and inclusion within our various entities is extremely important. And we've definitely seen a large movement in the publishing industry over the past maybe 3 or 4 years towards that. So that's an important element as well. But encouraging companies to have equal pay for equal work, allowing people time off to vote or to participate in civic duties, having team building exercises even where you have groups of colleagues going out and cleaning up beaches or picking up plastic waste. All of those things are really important. It's environmental and social at the same time. Working together, perhaps volunteering in kitchens where they provide food to people who are hungry or people who are living in poverty. I think all of those things are really important to encourage within our corporate environments, as well as obviously in our personal lives.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you made about being able to couple the social and the environmental to really have power pack impact. Thank you. And so, Mark, moving over to you, from your perspective, why is sustainability important specific to the book industry? And if you could talk, focus specifically on that social piece, that would be great too.
Sure. Well, I think we've, to some extent, moved beyond sustainability as a differentiator. I think as the focus on sustainability and as the expectations on sustainability have increased from investors and shareholders and customers and employees, sustainability has really become a business imperative. You have to be there, and you have to be able to tell your story, and you have to be able to tell it in a way that aligns with your customer base. And I think that's really important, particularly in the mature business that we're in. And, print on paper and, paper, I am amazed. We go to the Hill and continually sort of do paper 101 to policymakers, because people have this, legacy idea about, paper making being a dirty industry, and we have to educate them about, where we've come and what we're doing and how we're taking leadership roles in sustainability and reducing our environmental impact and providing a lot of innovation. And the same is the case for book manufacturers. You've got to tell your story. You've got to tell it in a way that is not just ink on paper, although we all love ink on paper. You've got to tell it where your constituents are. So you've got to use different channels, not just putting it on paper, not just doing a sustainability report on paper and mailing it to everybody. You've got to use the channels that you have. And I think that it's vitally important to tell your story, because if you don't do it in a credible way, somebody else will.
Yeah, great point. And great point about sharing the message digitally as well, which can be spread so quickly. I mean, I know we're here at a paper conference, a book conference, but as was said, it's a both and. We can both use technology and paper to advance these initiatives. So really good point. And then Kathi, same question. Why is sustainability specifically important to the book industry?
Well, I think Mark covered a lot of it very well. As few as probably 10 years ago, sustainability was more of a nice thing to do. Mm-hmm. It was a nice thing to have as part of your business. Now it really is a business imperative. And one of the most valuable things I think that you can do from your business, from a business perspective, is to be able to tell your sustainability story succinctly using credible fact-based information, so that when you talk to your customers and they ask you a question about your sustainability, you basically have your elevator speech ready, and you can say, this is why my business is sustainable. And at Two Sides, we have a lot of that information available for you, and when you combine those kinds of facts with the things that you're doing in your own business, I think you'll find that you have a really impressive story that you can share with customers. And it's also actually, as younger people are coming up into the industry, it's also the younger people, I'm sure, as you know, are very environmentally aware. They want to work for companies that are sustainable and are not harming the environment. So when you can share your sustainability story with potential employees, you also have a great recruiting tool as well.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And as far as the science-based facts and science-based targets, I'll tell you, and speaking to the progression of sustainability being widely adopted, I have had multiple conversations with Fortune 10, Fortune 50 companies that are now finally putting their funding dollars behind sustainability initiatives. So it's no longer a nice to have now, it's a must have. And they're proving that by funding sustainability projects that include social, environmental, and governance. So I was thrilled during a recent call actually when an executive told me that her bonus compensation was linked to her sustainability objectives. I was shocked and thrilled because in the, like I said, 20 plus years in this industry, I've never heard something like that before. So it's a really exciting time. To Kathy's point, young people are getting more and more involved. I was speaking with some folks last night, just kind of reminding everybody that, it's the future generations that are really going to make a difference. In 2019, we had our first global strike, and I get goosebumps every time I say it, because if you think about that, we've never had a global strike, and it was a global strike about climate change, and it was organized by young people. I mean, it's just phenomenal, the amount of impact that they can have, how quickly we can force change. I don't know, it's very exciting. Okay, so I'll get off my soapbox for a moment here. And it looks like we've got, let's do one more question, which would be, can you each give me just one example of a concrete way that you have put sustainability in practice? And let's go ahead and start with Sherri.
Thank you. Maybe I can speak a little bit about what the UN has actually done. We just put out a report yesterday on the what the UN is actually doing, because we need to lead by example here. It's not just about coming to events and telling everybody else what they have to do. It's what are we doing? So we have this report called Greening the Blue, which is also printed. And we have about 315,000 people who work for the UN around the world. And we've identified that the bulk of our carbon footprint comes from our facilities, about 55% of it, and then 32% from air travel and 12% from other travel. We have offset 99% of it. And we noted that in 2020, it decreased by 19% compared to 2019. And that's largely due to COVID, right? So some of that wasn't because of necessarily actions that we're taking. It's because there were less people in the buildings, we used less water, there was less waste. But still, it does show us that we can have an impact. We can change things if we travel less, if we maybe work from home more, if we do things a little bit differently. It does have a big impact. And what can we learn from that? And how can we continue to implement that going forward? So those are some examples of what the impact of our efforts at the UN have been. So for example, the UN, you're not allowed to bring single-use plastic into UN headquarters in New York. There's a big sign on the front of the building saying you can't bring single-use plastics, for example. So we have a number of things like that. We have garbage cans where you have to sort your garbage in the building. Everybody brings their own water bottles. We drink water. There are no plastic water bottles available in the building. So those are some of the things that we've done to reduce our carbon footprint and have more sustainable practices. In terms of what you were saying, Emily, about social aspects, obviously the UN is fully committed to human rights and reducing inequalities and security. But in addition to that, our own human resources policies are very much about gender equality and promoting women. The Secretary General committed to having full gender parity in senior management and has achieved and even gone beyond that. So we do, as I say, try and walk the talk.
Wonderful, thank you. So I'm going to offer an example of one thing that we're doing at Roland to implement sustainability, and that is that we are almost a certified B Corp. And if y'all don't know what that means, certain companies like Danone North America, Patagonia, of course, is one, but a B Corp or benefit corporation is a company that's gone through a very, very exhaustive and legal framework and assessment that evaluates their impact on people, planet, and communities. And they're companies that have committed to social and environmental positive impact. So really happy to say that we are just months away from achieving our B Corp status. Okay, so Mark, let's go with you. Could you give one example of how you are seeing sustainability put into practice, or how you're doing that yourself.
Sure. I think the best example is the first slide that I showed on the screen with our Better Planet 2030 goals. This was done, it was a very exhaustive process where we involved, obviously our members, other stakeholders like environmental groups, customers, academics, government. So we worked together and all kind of came up with these goals together. And it wasn't just the categories, it was the actual goals themselves. And it was a very stakeholder heavy process. And every AF&PA member has to annually commit to working toward those goals. And some achieve it more than others based on their circumstances. So that's probably the best example that I can think of. And I'm also happy to say that we had huge debate within our organization about, should the paper industry come up with a definition of sustainability for our industry? And I'm glad to say that we didn't. Because if you asked, different industries, you're going to get, a different answer for each one. And we didn't want to pigeonhole ourselves, but we did want to make sure that we are contributing to the circular economy and to sustainability. And that's how these goals were set. So I think that's probably the best example that I can give you. And then, and to latch onto that, as we rolled these out and promoted these goals, we also included, announced that AF&PA in our industry have committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion within the industry as well. So we've taken it a step further than just typical environmental kinds of goals.
Wonderful, and I think it's notable and so important what you said about we didn't all agree, because I think the richness is in the conversation and asking the questions, right? And we're not all going to agree on anything, and it might take a really long time, but the fact that we can all be respectful and be heard and then eventually come up with something that works for everybody is so important. So I think, just asking those questions and putting those topics out there is really, where the richness lies. I recently launched a survey in our company, and my colleague Dave, who's here, took it, and I said, I hope you ripped us to shreds because I want the truth, right? We need the truth when we ask these questions. What does sustainability mean to this industry? Are we being welcoming and inclusive and diverse in our companies? How could we be doing better? And it's not a matter of shaming ourselves or shaming our companies. It's a matter of accepting where we are and then making these commitments to do better. So I think what you touched on is really important. And lastly, Kathi, but definitely not least, somebody who I now want on my side if I ever get into a debate about marketing language and versus science-based facts. One example of how you've seen sustainability put in practice in a meaningful and impactful way, please.
Well, I think at two sides. We've been talking a little bit about collaboration, and I think that's one of our great strengths, is that while we're advocates and evangelists for the sustainability of paper, we're also a very collaborative organization. Our board is made up of member companies from across the industry, and some of your companies that are here today have members on our board. We have committees on sustainability and communications and sustainable packaging, and all of those committees are made up of member companies who keep us informed on what's going on in the industry and what we need to know to better serve our members and to make sure that the sustainability message is being communicated in a way that's effective not only for them and their businesses, but also for their customers.
Wonderful. Okay, we've got about 10 minutes for questions. I would love to open it up. Questions, comments? Gentleman in the back.
Oh, yep, here we go. David? I've heard the term greenwashing used on occasion, and I'm not sure what that really means. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I absolutely can. And it looks like Sherri is smirking, and she may have a pretty good answer too. So I'm going to let her go ahead and take a
Did you
stab
plant
at
that question?
The question is, what does greenwashing mean?
Thank you. Yes, this is something that we hear a lot at the UN. We also hear about blue washing. And basically what that means is, I'll start with greenwashing, then I'll explain blue washing. So greenwashing means that you just have a veneer of sustainable business practices or sustainability without the reality behind it. So maybe you're communicating about how well you are complying with certain rules, or you're putting sustainability language on your website, but in reality, there is no concrete action that goes behind it. And the same goes with, we call it blue washing at the UN, people who sort of pretend like they're affiliated with the UN in order to benefit from that positive association, but in fact, they're not affiliated with the UN. So it's sort of a disconnect between words and acts.
Right, right. So we're making sustainability claims. We're specifically in our marketing, not we, but a company would be using marketing that is sustainability friendly, but there's no actual science-based targets behind what they're saying. So it's what they're saying and what they're doing doesn't match up. That's what greenwashing is.
And that, if I might, that's
Please.
one of two sides. Primary campaigns is an anti-greenwashing campaign, and that goes back to what I was talking about actually directly challenging companies that are saying that paper is unsustainable and providing them the information that shows that paper is actually one of the most sustainable materials on Earth.
Great.
Thank you.
More
Anybody else?
questions?
So, wait, of course, always on the side of the room. Dang it.
You're getting your steps in.
Dang. If I were to walk over there, I guarantee someone over there would have had a question.
I have another question, but I'm pretty curious. What's blue washing before the question?
So blue washing is a similar thing to greenwashing, but the UN. The color of the UN's emblem is blue, or the UN flag is blue. So it's a similar thing where people try and affiliate themselves with the United Nations, even though they're not affiliated with the United Nations, to benefit from the reputational advantage to being affiliated with the United Nations.
Great. In our conference this morning, we heard about publishers with challenges with their supply chains and overseas, and I wondered if anyone on the panel knows of resources that BMI or our member companies might be able to access to help ourselves in North America compare the impact of containers of printed books would be ideal, or printed materials being imported into North America from other continents like Asia or Europe or South America, and that. Are there credible resources that we can reference and help our publishers and our customers and our supply chain in North America understand the differences in impact of onshoring versus some of the offshoring options that our publishers are working through?
Yeah, so I can jump in. So we're talking about scope 3 impacts, which is the carbon that happens after the product leaves the manufacturer, right? And so there is something called the eco-calculator, and you can look online, and they've done a pretty good job of providing those scope 3 impacts for all kinds of different products. Do you guys have any other resources you can share?
Thank you. So you're good.
Okay, eco paper calculator, yeah, and it's backed by science-based data, so it's credible.
Okay, another one over here.
Thanks for being here today, all of you. I'm wondering, it seems to me with COP happening right now, what's the money is following sustainability initiatives right now. That is, big banks and whatnot are actually being forced into financing and supporting good, sustainable practices and businesses that are sustainable. And it seems to me in this room that we all have not only a responsibility and stewardship, but that we have an opportunity, and maybe we're gonna need over time to adjust our businesses such that in order to get the financing that we need, that we have to go this way. It's also a business opportunity for us, obviously, and it's fascinating. I'm sort of mapping out here the people that we have speaking for us. We have the voice of the world. We have the voice of an actual paper manufacturer. We have the voice of the association for the paper business. And then we have an advocate who is out here saying, we don't kill trees. We're not tree killers. And everybody in this room is good, and we need that, right? It's a fascinating cross-section. I don't really have a comment. I just wanted to I don't have a question. I just wanted to say thank you.
Well, thank you. No, and I think that that's a really great point, is that more and more, like, the money is showing up, right? And so for us to be able to put these sustainability, these ESG strategies in place now, there is a phenomenal opportunity, because you're right, banks and board members are demanding ESG goals. So for everybody in this room to be kind of ahead of the curve, it's only going to lead to success. So I think your point is really valid and important.
Kathi, could you talk a little bit about your one-page infographics that are available?
Sure. I mean, we have a wide variety of resources. We have infographics that basically talk about everything that we do is fact-based. So our infographics will have facts on sustainable forestry, for example, or the paper-making process and the various elements of the paper-making process that are available on our website. Give a little plug for the website. It's two sides, NA. Make sure you include the NA for North America, because we are a global organization. Two sides, NA.org. Also fact sheets and a variety of, I would just encourage you to check out the entire website, because I think you'll find lots of useful information there. But folks particularly find the infographics useful to use at meetings and as handouts and those kinds of things.
Great. We have time for one more question. Hi.
Hi, I have a question. This might be really for you, Sherri. With regards to publishers, we heard this morning it's still going to be a global enterprise. And what are you doing, and what is the UN doing with regards to North America and Europe are complying, but what's going on with China?
So all of our member states signed up for the Sustainable Development Goals. The goals were ratified by all member states, all 193, including member states such as China or member states in the developing world. So there is that commitment on paper. The same goes for the Conference of the Parties, COP26, which is taking place right now. We don't single out particular member states. We feel it's very important to really maintain dialogue and to be inclusive. It's about multilateral negotiations, working together, and not ostracizing people who are maybe not as far along the path as other countries. There's a very important debate to be had about the developed world that was able to become the developed world thanks to using fossil fuels and really creating this climate emergency that we're in now, and then the developing world that needs to develop, that needs to catch up in order to reduce inequality. So how do we do that? And a lot of it comes down to financing for the developed world, to finance that in the developing world, so that we are all on equal footing as we go forward. Because it's one planet. It's not one member state's planet or another member state's planet. It's one planet. So this affects all of us. So it's about leveling that playing field, and in particular through financing for development and financing projects that are green energy projects or things that do allow us to move forward. And so that's what is happening right now. It's hard work. You get down into the weeds, nitty-gritty negotiations that are taking place right now at COP. Last week was the big splashy events, and this week is the people who are rolling up their sleeves and sleepless nights and lots of coffee and trying to figure out who can do what in order to save the planet.
Great.
Emily, if I might just add
Please.
one sort of closing thought. I think we've had a lot of really good things to say about our industry, and I think on the sustainability arena, the U.S. papermaking and print and book manufacturing industry is very well positioned for a really positive story. So, the question is, where is this all going? And, we haven't talked about risk. And at least from our perspective, the risk is really government trying to decide what they think sustainability is and then driving it through the industry. We've already seen some of that in terms of government mandates on what things can and can't be in paper, what things can and can't be in books. So I think that's something that we all need to be aware of and be aware of that risk and work together so that we don't let bad things happen or things that aren't intended to happen to our industry so that we can stay on that sustainability track.
Thank you. Kathi, final thought?
I'm just, sorry. I'm just really pleased to be here today, and I really hope you'll take to heart that message to craft your own sustainability story. And at Two Sides, as I said, we have the resources to help you do that. But I think it's good for your business, for your customers, and also for the planet, because the more that we can all share the story and make sure that everyone is hearing the right information so that they can, again, make informed decisions, I think is really important.
Great. And my final thought kind of goes along with yours, Kathi, is, and this is it's very much aspirational, and but it is, while we're thinking about crafting our sustainability stories, I would encourage you all to not only think about how we can be sustainable so that we can maintain our resources, but how can we actually go a step beyond that so that we're having positive impacts in our environment, in our communities, and in the world at large. So thanks everybody very much for being here.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. So the only thing I'd like to add around sustainability is I have a feeling, based on our board meeting yesterday, that this is going to be a pretty hot topic for BMI over the next year. And if anybody here has any thoughts about what can BMI as the organization do to assist you and your company in what you're doing around sustainability, let me know, please. Because we're going to have a board meeting, probably January, February timeframe. That'll be a much heavier duty working type meeting, trying to figure out what is it that BMI can do to help continue to add value to your membership and to this industry. And I think sustainability is definitely going to be one of those topics. So if you have thoughts, shoot me those emails so I can bring it to the table, and we'll try to go from there. But thank you very much, panelists. We're going to break for 30 minutes. We'll be back in here at 3 o'clock.
Thank you.